Thank you. Thank you. I can see there is a lot of networking that needs to be done. And the good news is that lunch will be a longer break for you to do that. But we are ready to start our next session now, which is going to look at the current and future opportunities and challenges for LDCs as they face that challenge of integration into the regional and global trade communities amidst global uncertainty, of which we are all very aware. We're going to be looking to try and identify the types of policies, measures and partnerships that will be needed for LDCs to manage the risks in this period of global uncertainty. How can we maximize the benefits of a growing global economy for all, not just for a few? And I'm delighted to introduce your moderator for this session, Mr. Sean Doherty, who is the head of the International Trade and Investment at the World Economic Forum. Sean.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for rejoining us. I think my immediate task now is to welcome the panelists to join us on stage. So if I can ask all the panelists to come up. As they come up, please let me call them out by name. We have Werikhe Michael Kafabusa, Minister of State and Trade of Uganda. Minister. Welcome. We have Patricia Scotland, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Baroness Scotland. We have Arancha González, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center. We have Kamrang TEKRETH, Secretary of State at the Ministry of Commerce of Cambodia. And we have Joost, Professor of International Law at the Graduate Institute in Geneva. Well, so our topic for this discussion is new paths for LDCs in multilateral and regional trade. And without further ado, we're going to start with a short scene-setting presentation by Professor Pauwelyn. So, Joost, over to you.
Microphone, please, for the speaker.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. It's a delight to be here. The organizers asked me to say a few words of scene setting to kick it off with some ideas for discussion. And I will just start with the elephant in the room. What is going on with the world trading system? It's under fire. We see trade restrictions imposed, retaliation, counter-retaliation. If you're a least developed country, how do you deal with this? We live in a time of real upheaval, change, risk, uncertainty, and if you're the weaker members of the pack, how do you address the situation? So the analogy I would think of is a wolf pack, right? And for decades they've been roaming the steppe and things have gone well, but all of a sudden we see the top dogs in a big fight today. And if you're a younger wolf, a weakling, what do you do? Do you engage in a fight? Do you choose sides? Do you lay low until it's all over? Because make no mistake, I think this is a turning point. People have said this is perhaps the second pillar of Bretton Woods falling apart. The US pulled out of the pegged currency system in 1971. This is the year I was born. Perhaps this year, or the next, the second pillar, the world trading system as we know it, may go through a major shift. Other people are referring to peak globalization. We've all heard about peak oil, peak trade. The Secretary General of UNCTAD mentioned it. In their World Investment Report, they found that foreign direct investment has dropped by 24% last year. Now that we start understanding how global value chains work, it seems they are stagnating. How, as least developed countries, do we deal with this? Just a few ideas on the crisis and then a few ideas on how to make trade agreements work for least developed countries. Now, on the crisis, first of all, never waste a good crisis. There is a crisis going on. Even for least developed countries, I think we have to ask the question, what is it you would like to see changed in the system? Now is the moment that we will see change, most probably. What is it that you want to push for, rather than just lay low while the big dogs are fighting? What is it that you want to put on the agenda for change? And there may be some alignment. People are saying we have to get rid of subsidies more. Fantastic for cotton. Great for domestic support on agriculture. People are pushing for reciprocity. We heard it already. If you look at the trade balance of many least developed countries, it's often more imports than exports, other than raw materials. People are pushing to end special and differential treatment, or to have more of a differentiation between developing countries. Here as well, there may be a moment for the least developed to position themselves to make the best out of that shift. At the same time, what is it that you want to keep within the system that we have today? Change may be good, but what is it that in the system today that is most valuable to you developing countries, least developed countries? And there I would say, but I'm biased, I'm a lawyer by education. Do you want to have a power-based system or a rules-based system? What we now have is kind of a rules-based system, but there's a shift, there's a push towards going back to power-based. You may not be hit by the steel tariffs today or even by the retaliation that is being imposed, but there will be casualties, collateral damage, and if you're hit, but you have a small standing, you're a small country, you don't have power, how do you negotiate your way out? The EU, Brazil, Argentina, they may be able to do it, but what if you're a least developed country? If it's power-based, I think the younglings, the weakers in the wolf pack lose out, no doubt. And I'm not just thinking about pushes from one side. If you think of China's One Belt, One Road, there as well, it's a shift, it's a different approach. They come into the countries, they offer infrastructure, but when you negotiate, there may be asymmetries. So one is rules-based, I think, works in your favor. The other element in the system today that I would defend at all costs is MFN. There may be pushes, there may be deals between the US and China, the US and Europe, but what if they are kept on a reciprocal basis? I noticed that China was going to reduce their tariffs on car parts from 25 to 15%. The good news there was they would do it on an MFN basis. But what if they don't? So if you move back from rules to power-based, I think that is a major shift that I would be really worried about. A couple of ideas on how can we make trade agreements work for least developed countries. Ideas more on process than on substance. Just 3 of them, and I'll end there. One, move from an ideological agenda to a data-driven agenda. Too often when I attend meetings like this, we stay at a very abstract level, either pro-free trade or against, with abstract demands for special and differential treatment. What about actually looking at the data? What are you exporting? Which countries are holding your exports back? What trade restrictions hurt you the most? And on that basis, build up a positive agenda rather than a defensive one. Second point, and there as well I'm kind of guilty as a specialist lawyer, I think the days of sending in trade specialists and changing trade policy in isolation in a silo doesn't work. We heard it again from UNCTAD this morning, a perfect example. I've always been puzzled when Afghanistan joined the WTO, they had to cut their tariffs from 50, 60% to much lower levels, even though most of their budget was coming from import duties. You can't just say cutting tariffs is a good thing in and of itself. You have to deal with it. You then have to find budget elsewhere. So you have to complement your tariff reduction as part of WTO membership with efforts to make your import duty collection system more efficient. If you think of regional trade agreements, a good friend of mine from Mexico has made the point, NAFTA is not a development policy. You can't just sign a trade agreement and say, this is our development policy. The African Free Trade Area, African Continental Free Trade Area that was signed last March, that cannot be in and of itself a development policy. You have to supplement it with other things. You may have the perfect government procurement code in place, but if someone comes to your country and says, okay, we will build a big dam and it will be for free, very often the government procurement code is sidelined. Same thing with competition. Same thing with trade flows or investment flows actually happening, but then if you don't have a good tax system in place, the revenues, the tax revenues, instead of going to Zambia, they come to Switzerland. So to think of trade policy not in a silo, in a test tube, but trade policy as just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. So it's complicated, it's very complex. I land on a third suggestion, and I know in this venue, in these circles, capacity building, technical cooperation is a big thing. And of course it's needed. I've been president of a small NGO trade lab where we help developing countries, NGOs, businesses make the most of trade agreements. My experience has been that it's often not a problem of capacity or resources that are lacking. Most of the time, it's a problem of awareness. Young people in your countries don't even know about trade agreements. The business sector, the private sector are not aware of how these trade agreements could benefit them. So with our little NGO, we've been helping developing countries set up a trade remedy domestic authority to actually investigate anti-dumping. We've helped NGOs trying to export goods from Syria into the US and deal with US sanctions regimes. So the third advice I would have is build on awareness. Young people, I teach in universities. We need to explain to them what these trade agreements do, not just in Geneva, but also in developing countries. Look at regional trade agreements. They've set up wonderful cathedrals, even regional courts, but no cases are going to these courts. If you look at the East African Community Court, if you look at the Caribbean Court of Justice, if you look at the ECOWAS Court, most of the cases they deal with are human rights cases, because there you have mobilization of actors who care about human rights. For trade, we seem to be operating in a vacuum. We have to build awareness and use these courts, use these wonderful cathedrals, so that they can make a difference in practice. I'll end here. So on the crisis, think what you want to change. Don't just sit back and wait until the dust has settled. And defend those elements that you value the most in the system. And then think of a positive agenda, not ideology-driven, but data-driven. A holistic trade policy agenda, not some abstract silo. And then think about awareness. How can we explain to people, traders, women traders, young people in universities, that the system is there for them, not just for diplomats? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, you've set us a task for the next hour or so to come up with a positive agenda. And I think that's what the panel is going to try and do. I'm going to turn to you now. We're going to try and structure this conversation in two parts. Firstly, we're going to talk about the change that we're seeing, the uncertainty which is there in world trade and what this means for LDCs. And then secondly, we're going to come back around and look for what are some of the opportunities for partnership. But let's start with that first point around change. So if I can turn first to you, Minister Kafabusa. So the African Continental Free Trade area, as Professor Pauwelyn mentioned, this is one of the youngest changes, revolutions we're seeing in trade relationships. What do you see this bringing in terms of opportunities and challenges for Uganda and for other landlocked LDCs in Africa?
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, First of all, I would like to appreciate EIF for supporting LDCs efforts in increasing trade. I would like to request development partners that we work with the EIF to continue supporting ALDs. Yes, as rightly observed, recently there was an agreement signed in Rwanda, Kigali, Rwanda, regarding the African Continental Free Trade Area. Yes, it is our belief that despite the global uncertainty and increased protectionist measures from some global players, Uganda, like other LDCs, stand to benefit from increased economic integration of the African continent, expanded trade, and increase in production capacity. Indeed, this is the setting that has been put in place. Yes, it is out of this that we can now cascade to actually policies in each respective African country, so that there is that free trade. Indeed, single-handedly as LDCs, especially in Africa, we cannot negotiate powerfully. But now, under that arrangement, we can then, of course, realize benefits, because we now move from the rules as observed and get to the power base, because that will actually have been created by this new development. And therefore, under here, we have conditions, political will from member states to make the free trade area a reality. This is something we have actually to work on, and this is the condition that we would like to see happen. And two, government support to domestic initiatives aimed at promoting and improving both domestic and regional trade. Build productive capacities of producers, especially SMEs, women, youth, and the physically challenged. The other condition is implementation of the trade facilitation agreement, removal of NTBs to support border coordination, including the establishment of border management committees, is actually another condition that we have to look at. Of course, with the incentives, we really have to look at the facilitation of domestic reforms and trade liberalization. We then have opportunities under the African Continental Free Trade Area. There are opportunities to not only African countries, but also to the whole of or the whole world. Then I would like to also look at the opportunities. Africa as a continent has the largest arable land, I think, in the world, over 870 million hectares, which is actually available. And of course, large reserves of strategic minerals, abundant aquatic resources, and the youngest population of 60 to 70%. This is a resource. We should look at this as a resource once this is equipped with relevant skills in order to tap into some of the indicated resources on the continent. Then I would like to end with the challenge, or the challenges. I would like to look at, of course, Africa as the least industrialized continent in the world, with the highest rates of unemployment, between 50 to 80% youth unemployment. And as I said, if we look at this as a resource and we actually arm it with relevant skills, we will be able to turn around and overcome some of these challenges. And of course, we have We have also to look at the limited value addition and inadequate standards of goods and products that we have on the continent. For us in Uganda, our objective in African economic integration is driven by the need for expanded markets for our growing economic operations, attract cross-border investment, creating employment opportunities for our young populations domestically through expansion of production of goods and services that will be demanded by the expanded markets, improving the interstate infrastructure and interconnectivity to enable the harness of the productive capacities. As I said, really, we as Africa, we should, as African continent, and of course together with other LDCs, we need to increase trade among ourselves in order to overcome some of these uncertainties that are going on in the world. Once we do that, then we'll also have the voice to actually negotiate with these other power producing or power blocks that are involved in the international trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. So we've heard the needs clearly there. Baroness Scotland, you lead a very important group of both developed and developing countries, the Commonwealth, of course. So how do you see trade, and ideally with a level playing field, helping LDCs to benefit from the opportunities?
I think that this is a moment of unprecedented challenge, but also unprecedented opportunity. The Commonwealth has, at its very core, collaboration and partnership. As everyone in this room knows, it's made up of 53 countries. It is encompassing 2.4 billion people, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. We have 25% of the world's landmass, and between us, 78% of the world's oceans. And the Commonwealth countries are brought together not by a treaty, but by a will. And so this Commonwealth family is an organization, a family built on rules, bound together by values, and are able to share a number of things. We have the same parliamentary structure, the same language, similar rules in terms of the common law. And from that, we've been able to identify in our first trade review in 2015 that there is a 19% trade advantage when Commonwealth countries trade with each other. But we also have, within that extraordinary range and diversity of our nations, a representation of virtually every region in the world, because we have African countries, Asian countries, Caribbean countries, the Americas, Europe, and the Pacific. We have some of the largest countries in the world, India, which is 1.2 billion. We have the smallest countries in the world, like Tuvalu, who have little over 11,000. And within that family, therefore, there is this petri dish in which we can taste and see the issues that are able to be grown. And therefore, we have a very great understanding of the challenges which face LDCs. 14 of our members are members of the LDC. And global trade for LDCs, as Secretary General Kikwete said this morning, has dropped to about 0.8%. But in the LDCs within the Commonwealth, we are at about 2% and growing. And I think one of the reasons that is so is that we're taking a holistic view and that we are able to share our rules. And there is immense untapped potential in intra-Commonwealth trade and investment for LDCs. And I think that was really recognised at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in London this year. And so our Commonwealth connectivity agenda, trade and investment, which is also predicated on partnership, has been critical. But it's a partnership amongst equals, and it's best possible trade related support for Commonwealth LDCs, and many are small, vulnerable economies and small island states. And we have concentrated, I believe rightly, on equality of arms, and I cannot agree with the Secretary-General more in saying that we have to concentrate on women. And now that the Vice President of Gambia is back, can I just say how much we welcome Gambia's return, but we also welcome the gender balance. And I want to compliment the organisers, because what you see on this platform, which is a rare thing, is a perfectly gender-balanced platform. And what we know is what men and women do together equally is so much better than what any of us do on our own. And so this concentration on young people, on women, on enabling practical delivery, I think is of real importance. And can I just say that we need to look at the intra-Commonwealth trade that there is now. At the moment, our estimate is that we've got about 580 billion intra-Commonwealth trade. We had hoped from the 2015 trade review that it would be by 2020 1 trillion, and we readdressed that issue and went downwards to say that it might be about 700 billion, but that was before two things happened. One is the WTO trade facilitation agreement. Two is what's just happened in Kigali with the African Continental Free Trade Area. Those two issues can be massive accelerants for us to work together with our LDCs, and I honestly believe we could be back on track to have 1 trillion intra-Commonwealth trade by 2020 and 2 trillion by 2030 for the following reasons. With our member states, we are working on creating the instruments which will be able to give us interoperability for our traders, both to support the the Continental Free Trade Area, but also the WTO trade accreditation system. So if we can create similar legal instruments to make it faster, cheaper, easier, and if those instruments are complementary and mirrored, we have the same mirrored instruments for the accreditation agreement and the same mirrored instruments for the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area, we have a game changer on our hands, because in the Commonwealth we have 19 African states, and we know that by 2021 the majority of LDCs are going to be African. And so if we can work together in partnership to create this integrated whole, I think that we will be able to take this terrible global trauma and turn it into something very creative. But that is if we choose, because it is going to demand real interoperability and partnership. And I'm really proud that after the conclusion of this session, we are going to sign with EIF a memorandum of understanding which will enable us to work hand in glove in a very practical way to deliver change. And I wanted to assure our first speaker that when he talked about the rules-based needs to go forward, that is our basis. When you talked about holistic delivery, that is what we're doing. We're integrating it into the delivery plan for the Sustainable Development Goals, and we are concentrating on creating implementation toolkits. But the best thing about the Commonwealth is because we come from all regions, all other countries should see themselves reflected in us. And if I may, I'm going to do a bit of advertising. If every single one of you has a smartphone, is there anyone in this room who does not have a smartphone? Okay. I want you all, if you would please, to enter thecommonwealth.org. It's our website. and you can turn it into a screensaver, because all the work that the Commonwealth is doing on trade, on governance and peace, on oceans, is now online. People have been saying that you've been carrying the Commonwealth in your heart up to now. You now have it in the palm of your hand, one click away. So at the end of the day, I'm going to be checking iPhones and smartphones, and if you all do not have this on your screensaver, I will want to know why. Because it has all the information you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will come back to you afterwards for some more thoughts on how to capitalize on the common characteristics across this group of countries. But first, Arancha, I mean, one, I think, feature perhaps of LDCs is a large number of SMEs, and you've led a lot of work on SME competitiveness. So given this, unstable, uncertain trade context that we have at the moment, what does that mean for LDCs, and what can we do to help them survive and hopefully thrive in this environment?
Well, let me start by telling Patricia that as soon as I finish my statement, I'm going to add the Commonwealth app to my iPad, just in case she comes back after me and I haven't done my job. But let me start by thanking Ratnakar and Annette for having put LDCs also in the trade scene. Because if you watch television or you listen to the radio or you look in your iPad, you would think that trade today is a matter of 4 or 5 big guys fighting like dogs, with lots and lots and lots of other countries just watching. So it is to them that we need to thank you for also having put LDCs as part of the trading scene. I just arrived from Kabul, Afghanistan. Before that, I was in Bhutan, and before that, I was in the Gambia with the Vice President. So what I want to tell you is not what I think. I will tell you what I've seen, and I will tell you what I've heard, so that we can use that as the basis for our discussion. What people have told me is that competitiveness matters to them because there is a competitiveness gap between their SMEs and their large companies. The bulk of their economies are SMEs, only a handful of large companies, and the gap in competitiveness between the big and the SMEs is huge. And actually, when I look at the figures, the gap in competitiveness is almost double in developing countries, in least developed countries, compared to developed countries. The gap exists everywhere, but this gap is much bigger in least developed countries. And this gap matters because obviously, if you're less competitive, you're less productive, you pay worse wages, and working conditions are worse. And what you all have in common is a huge challenge of creating quality jobs for the youth. That is the challenge of the 21st century, including young people into the job market with decent jobs, not just with any jobs. And when I talk about the youth, obviously, it's the men and the women who have over and above difficulties in getting these decent jobs that I'm just talking about. So there is a huge growth opportunity if we work on boosting the competitiveness of these small and medium enterprises. Now, what does all of this have to do with trade? Well, and here is why trade matters. Only the most competitive businesses can participate in international trade. And participating in international trade, they become more competitive. So there is a very clear link between trade, competitiveness, and jobs. And this is why this discussion is crucial to the challenge, again, of the 21st century, which is quality jobs, decent jobs. Now, let's start with the trade rules and the trade system. And let's just make sure that we get this right again. These rules and this system is not there for some sort of fancy desire by some big guys or some small guys. The rules and the system are there because what we need is to create stable opportunities. The rules of international trade that the WTO creates, the adjudication mechanism of the WTO, the dispute settlement, is there to create stable opportunities. Same can be said of regional agreements, such as the one we just heard from Michael, at the continental level in Africa, or bilaterals or regionals elsewhere. They are to create stable opportunities. Now, why do these stable opportunities matter? Because these stable opportunities and these rules is what will allow the rice producers that Kamrang cares about to move from exporting bulk rice to exporting nicely packaged organic rice. Because the difference is 1 to 10. 1 for bulk rice, 10 for nicely packaged organic rice. Because this is what will allow the people that Michael cares about to move from exporting leather to exporting shoes. 1 for leather, 20 or 30 or 50 for shoes. So it's about moving from agriculture to agro-processing. It's about moving from exporting commodities to exporting value-added industrial products. And in all of this, with a huge doses of services, in particular technology and digital services, which is a huge component of competitiveness, which is why the WTO needs to care about technology, because it is an integral part of the competitiveness today. So yes, dealing with subsidies, dealing with tariff escalation, dealing with rules on technology, all of this is what the WTO needs to do in order to create stable opportunities. And this is why it is important that you all work to make sure the WTO system, dispute settlement system, that is, works. Because for you, the guarantee is the power of the law, not the power of the might, is the power of the law. So this is all, I guess, I hope I've convinced you that this is why it is worth investing in rules and systems, including in the WTO. But we should not stop there, because all of this is about creating opportunities. We then need to translate these opportunities into action on the ground. So 4 things, there are many, many factors, but 4 things that, in my view, are essential to translate these opportunities. Very briefly, so that we can then enter in a dialogue. One is skills for the youth, but not just any skills, it's skills that are connected to markets. Understanding that what drives the skills is the market demand. Second, investing in quality infrastructure. You can't export rice or organic rice if you do not have quality infrastructure. You need to get the quality certified. That is what will allow you to export value added. 3 is access to finance and capital, without which we will continue to see incredible amounts of informal micro-entrepreneurs not adding to the competitiveness. And 4th and final, trade and investment institutions. Institutions matter. Sorry to come back to this point, because it's these institutions that will get the thousands, the millions of SMEs to markets. So this is what I've seen in my last trips. This is also what I've seen in my last 300 trips, because this is what's happening on the ground, Sean, for what is worth for the purposes of the discussion.
Thank you very much. Great observations. What we've seen, though, is that most of the world's growth is actually coming from Asia. So in turning to you, Dr. Kamrang TEKRETH, what's the secret? I mean, what policies or actions have you been experimenting with, or you've seen in neighboring countries that are helping LDCs in Asia to benefit, and whether that's on the agricultural markets or digital trade or other areas?
Thank you, Dr. Sean, for your question, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank EIF for providing us the opportunity to be here every year to join this global forum. And I would like to thank EAF for the support to Cambodia that can contribute very much to the growth of Cambodia. Like you mentioned that ASEAN facing very rapid growth, and for Cambodia during this last 2 decades, we can manage the growth around 7%. This is, we can say that the trade-led growth. And we can see since we joined the regional and global system, we can manage increase the trade every year around 15%. That means from 3 billion to 22 billion in the last 10 years. This is a lot of growth. But we can say that even we can maintain the growth, but there's still a lot of challenge. Like Ms. Arancha mentioned about the challenge of SME, but we can say the challenge of LDC, even LDC very diverse, but there may be some common challenge that we can discuss among others. For Cambodia, we have set up the strategy, the policy action that we can envision the country to become a high middle income country in the year 2000. Right now we are in the low middle income countries. We move from low income country to lower middle income country. And the government have the vision to become high income country in the year 2050. So how we can reach this goal, these targets? The policy action for Cambodia might not work for some country, but I just would like to share with you from our perspective and our experience. First, we need to invest more to develop human capital. This is a big challenge for LDC, especially for Cambodia. And we're doing this by starting from reforming education system, starting from primary, secondary to higher education, because we think that we need to equip our young people with the skill, the technology. We have tried to introduce the STEAM program, science, technology, engineers, to our young people. Another thing is we have invested in upgrading, building more technical skill with our policy on TEKRETH program, TEKRETH strategy. And there one support with the EIF program that support public-private partnership. We create the school, cooking school. I have with me the director of the school. You can set up and let us know. This is kind of PPP program that's supported by EIF to equip our young people with the skill that our countries can handle the increasing number of the tourism sector in the country. Second, we need to diversify our economy. We can say that Cambodia is trade-led growth, but we export only a few products. Agriculture, garment, shoe, and we need to diversify so that we can survive, we can sustain. So we have to expand into manufacturing products so that we can integrate into regional and global value chain. And this one we have highlight in our IDP, industrial development policy, that in this policy we also support to SME. Like you mentioned that SME is the one that need a lot of support, but they create a lot of jobs for people in the country. But they face very huge challenges that the government need to support them. And the third, we need to invest more in infrastructure, including physical infrastructures, also soft infrastructure, and also move to digital infrastructures. We have to work in more, government invest more in transport logistics. We have set up the logistic master plans, but we need to support the SME to move into digital, that they can catch up with the changing world, with the increasing trend of the digital trades. And for Cambodia, have strong advocate to the digital economy, digital innovation. That's why we have developed the telecom law, and also Cambodia gonna. I hope that we can finish the e-commerce law very soon, and we will work with UNTAD and under support from EIF to do research and development in digital trade, so that we can support the young people, the country, to be ready to help the SME on these e-trades. And the last one, but not least, I think that from our experience, the growth of the countries, because of the peace stability in the countries, because of domestic reform in the countries, but because of the support from the international community, the support from international organizations, like I mentioned about EIF, that they always been with us during these 10 years. They can contribute very much to the creating job for the women, for the youth. They also help us to build the capacity for trade in export. And I can say that this link to our policy to open our trade, to integrate the country into regional and global value chain. I think this all is very important to have our country grow, and we have to do more. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think we have no shortage of a positive agenda. The difficulty is going to be, I think, prioritizing. So we're going to turn to the audience in a few minutes. So maybe just try and see if you can come up with a very succinct question. But before I do that, I want to come back to each of the panelists for just some very quick thoughts on this issue of partnerships and alliances, which has been brought up. And maybe we can start with the regional views. So turning first to Minister Kafabusa and then back to you, Dr. Kamrang TEKRETH. What do you see as some of the most important partnership opportunities for building economic relationships between countries and for creating a better functioning global trade system?
First of all, we must look at the policies within each country, and then synchronize these policies with other countries that are going to actually get involved in trade, or the ones that we are going to trade with. Because if you talk of infrastructure, for example, regionally, say if you're building either roads or railways or airports, I think all the countries in a given region must actually be aligned in that direction, so that whatever they do is going to actually help the countries either trade among themselves or even trade with other international blocks. Then we are talking about having the skills for the young people. Really, once we bring together resources, we'll be able to look at which country has given skills that could be utilized in actually promoting and making the populations aware of the trade opportunities either regionally or across the continent, so that in the end we may actually crisscross the borders of these countries in ensuring that these skills of the youth, women, are actually tapped into. So these are the areas that we have to look at, especially from the policy point of view.
Thank you. Dr. TEKRETH, would you agree with that? It's a coordination, alignment on infrastructure, skills, other issues. What would you add?
Yes, through our experience, we can say that to bridge the economic gap between countries is very important, especially for LDC. And through our experience by becoming a member of ASEAN, we can see that we can have the opportunity to create much better flow of trade in goods, much better flow of trade in service. We can attract more investors, and we can have to mobilize the workforce in the country and in the region. Another thing is, even there seem to be a changing world, and there seem to increasing the protectionism, but I think that a lot of countries still support the free trades. And for Cambodia, because of the integration into the regional and global trading system, and because of the our access to WTO members, we can see a lot of benefit to the countries. We can export more. This export lead to the growth of the country. This export can create more jobs for women, for the vulnerable people. because of the free trade agreement, because of the preferential trade agreement that we receive in the region and from WTO as an LDC and as the ASEAN members. So that's why we think that the partnership is very important for LDC to increase, to maintain the growth. So I think that we can do more if we do together. And in this situation, even countries have different level of development, but I think that each country have their respective strengths, have their own specialized strength support that we can give to other people. And I believe in the when you give, you receive. So I think that the support from the donors to LDC, the support through the multilateral trading system, this very much can help LDC to bring a little bit gap of development, and we can help the LDC to move forward. So that's why I would like to call on all the nation to support this system, this multilateral system, so that can help the developed country, but also can help the least developed country. So once again, we should do more together, and we should give more. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you're all taking note out there. Arancha, I think you would probably agree that partnerships imply including people, and obviously some of the groups who are sometimes excluded from these arrangements are women and youth. But what does inclusiveness really mean in terms of trying to empower these groups? What have you seen that actually works?
Well, I think you know that this is an issue that is particularly close to the heart of ITC. This notion that it's not just trade, but it's trade with adjectives. And one of these adjectives is inclusiveness. And inclusiveness, to a large extent, is about including 50% of the population that sometimes is not participating in international trade. These are the women. It's also about the youth more broadly who have specific difficulties. I think, to be quite honest with you, I think we know why we have to do it. We know how to do it, and we know the impact of doing it. And yet we're not doing it. Or at least not everybody is doing it, let's say. And I think part of this has to do with the idea, and it's included in the word empowering, that there is a bit of a power struggle between this. So my sense is that we should not see the inclusion of women and youth as a win-lose game, but rather as a win-win game. That is, I think, at the heart of what we have to consider. Now, I have seen, at least in this last months, a very important shift, at least as regards women's economic empowerment in the membership of this organization. We saw in Buenos Aires 120 countries sign on a declaration that says they want to make sure that their trade policies are more inclusive. We are now at 122, but we are still short of all membership. So please, those of you that have not signed on to this declaration and care about this, please support it. We have seen in the Commonwealth Summit that Patricia and the UK hosted recently a launch of a big chapter of She Trades for the Commonwealth, which again is a big signal that the Commonwealth family cares about this issue. We have very recently worked on a partnership with EAF to focus on women's economic empowerment, with our first country to benefit from this in the Gambia. And we are seeing a lot of partnerships with the private sector that care more and more about this inclusion. So to me, it's not just a question of why do we have to do it and all of that. That was the past century. 21st century is about doing it, embarking on it, because we think, as Kamrang just said, we can do more if we do together. Thank you for that. That was a great quote.
Thank you, Arancha. And there was a comment before that this panel is gender balanced. I should also note that all of us here are under 25 as well. Baroness Scotland, you commented before that the Commonwealth, obviously one of its advantages is that you have at least some form of shared history, shared languages, shared values. How does that help to form partnerships in some of the trickier areas to do with regulation and other things which are a little bit harder to get into than just tariffs?
Well, I think one of the great things we have is the common law. And as you know, the common law is the baseline for international commercial law. And therefore, anything that we in the Commonwealth create is capable of being used by everybody else, because it is that interoperability of the legal framework which gives us a real chance of success. And I, not surprisingly, agree with absolutely every word that Arancha has said. And it's not just because she is a great woman and a friend, it's because she's right. And I think from what both of all the panelists have said, you can see that we are moving in the same direction in relation to the fact that partnership is the only way to do it. Now, if we go back to look at the WTO trade facilitation agreement, 49 of the 53 members of the Commonwealth have signed up, are members of that. 49 of the 53 are members of the WTO, 42 have signed up to the trade facilitation agreement. And therefore, there is a platform for those 42 to work together on creating an instrument or instruments which can implement. And that means that when we're delivering or working with our 19 members of the AU on their continental free trade area, we can have interoperability between those. But there's a huge opportunity for all the agencies to work together. What ITC is doing, what Secretary General Katoe is doing on UNCTAD, what EIF is doing, what we're doing in the Commonwealth, all of this interlinks. It's as if we have an opportunity to create a spine into which we can all join, if we choose. And I think that's a huge opportunity. But I need to say perhaps why we in the Commonwealth in the last 2 years have been listening so hard and have created the Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform and also an innovation hub. Because many of our countries were coming to us, particularly the LDCs, saying, I would like to change my law. I would like to update it, but I don't have enough parliamentary draftsmen and women. I can't do it on my own. And yet, there is an opportunity for us to create framework legislation, best practice legislation that countries can adopt. Also, the 53 countries each have fantastic innovations, but many of them don't know about those innovations. The 53 each have something that they are number one in the world at, but they don't know that the others are number one. Well, what if the 53 decide that they're going to share their number one with the other 52? So we now have 53 number ones that every one of the 53 countries can now share. And as a result of listening, as I know Arancha has been listening, what can we do? How can we make a difference? That is why I created the Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform, which is on our website. That has the laws of 53 countries in one place. And it means that the ministers of justice and the attorney generals who are thinking of creating a new law can go to that website and look at what their brothers and sisters have already done. Now, that part of the site is for the attorneys generals, but everything else is free. So all the structures that we've made on law in relation to the Commonwealth countries are now available to any country who may wish to look at it. And since our structure is compatible with the global structure needed to implement best practice because of common law, it is available for us to join together. And I think, and we've also created an innovation hub. So if you go onto our website, under the countries, you'll have the innovations of 53 countries. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So this partnership, this coming together, is critical. And we also have 86 accredited Commonwealth associations also there. And I believe that everybody in this room has a choice. We can either continue to, along the way, the path we have now, and we can drown separately, or we can swim together. And I'm for swimming together. And I know that the panelists sound as if they're for swimming together too. So I think the choice is everyone out there. I hope we'll all swim, and none of us will drown.
Okay, so I think we now have an invitation for those of you in the room. Maybe we can collect a couple of questions and then we'll take them back. So we have a gentleman here and then a gentleman there. Please.
Hello, everyone. Hannes Schlippmann of WTI Advisors. I'd love to see you guys swim together, actually. There's a lake out there. The water is 18 degrees. It's a bit fresh, but it is definitely vitalizing. Can recommend it. I wanted to quickly mention a word that came late in the process, but it did come, services. I think it's very, very important when we talk about LDCs to talk about another elephant in the room, and that is services. There is a myth out there that somehow jobs and good jobs are in manufacturing and bad jobs are in services. That is bollocks. You can ditch that. It has been disproven quite a bit. I know it still is being ventilated, but I want to tell you a very quick story. It takes about 20 seconds. This evening, I'm going to Annecy, 40 kilometers from here. There is the world's major animation film festival. One of the films in the running, premiering tonight, is Funan, produced by a Cambodian animation studio. A Cambodian animation studio. So how can that happen? A Cambodian animation studio that is, I would say, probably a social business, but it's a business, not an NGO. Quite consciously being a business. Investing in youth, producing youth employment of the very sexy type. It's skilled employment, but it doesn't presuppose that you have a university degree. It's technology-driven, it's youth-oriented, it's very, very interesting. So services. Joost said something very important. Are we ideology-driven or are we data-driven? It's very difficult to be data-driven on services because the data are bad. So we have to partly replace them as we move on better statistics. But make no mistakes. Servicification, automation, digitalization are out there, and they apply to everything. This is where a lot of future lies. I'm not belittling the rest, but I'm saying there's a lot of future here. We need to move on the basis of data that we can collect, and that means talking to businesses. So my encouragement is, let's focus a little bit on services. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mohammed Yassin from the University of Udine, Italy. I have some perplexity about what has been mentioned, especially from the Commonwealth. And yes, of course, you are sharing values and you are sharing rules and whatever you have mentioned. But what I have noticed that there is little sharing of capital, financial capital, especially the money. This is badly needed for the graduation of the LDCs. Long time we have been in this list of the LDCs with very little graduation. I think only one graduated from the LDCs. So my question, how much money these partners who has in the Commonwealth is going to put in order to at least facilitate and enhance the integration of the LDCs in the global trade system. We see the major actors, the major players in the Commonwealth, especially UK, exiting from the unions. They are reluctant to share the wealth with their peer wealthy other nations in Europe. How much willing will they be able to share these wealth with these countries in the LDCs? 17 out of 53 countries in the LDCs are from Africa. And I see the bulk majority here in this room are from Africa. And the African poverty and exclusion is not a coincidence. It is a result of a shared history between those members in the World Trade Organization and the African continents. So, and if this money also is put on the table, my question is to Mr. Michael, how Africa is going to channel this in order to facilitate the inclusion of the African people, especially small and medium-sized enterprises and women in the global trade. And also my request also to the professor from Geneva Institute, you have posed a lot of questions. I wish that you will answer most of these questions in a written statement. That will be very fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more from the floor? We have one more here.
Merci beaucoup. Je remercie très sincèrement les panélistes. Je voudrais dire que sur deux plans, nous avons des attentes. Les PMA, nous exhortons les membres dans les différentes configurations à faire avancer les travaux de négociation. Il a été mentionné ce matin certains points de négociation et dans le partenariat que nous encourageons, les résultats dans les négociations sont également importants. On a cité le coton et il y a d'autres secteurs de négociation, l'agriculture en général, les subventions à la pêche et je pourrais continuer la liste. Pour revenir au cadre intégré renforcé, je voudrais dire que c'est un instrument utile et bénéfique pour les PMA. Nous sommes sortis hier soir de la session du Conseil du cadre intégré renforcé et nous avons vu les résultats. C'est un joyau à entretenir. Et les partenaires, au passage, je voudrais les remercier parce que je préside le Conseil du cadre intégré renforcé. Il y a de leur part un engagement réel. Au nom des membres bénéficiaires, je voudrais les remercier très sincèrement et les encourager à continuer cet accompagnement bénéfique pour les PMA. Il y a différents domaines dans lesquels des projets sont soumis et nous avons en ce moment, disons, des résultats qui ont été présentés venant des expériences de terrain. Le Cambodge et l'Ouganda ont parlé. Il y a plusieurs membres PMA qui sont dans la salle, dont leur ministre et Madame la vice-présidente de la Gambie nous fait honneur d'être dans cette session. Et dans ce rapport annuel 2017, nous verrons et nous voyons des synthèses et des images intéressantes qui montrent que les résultats sont là et il nous faudra accompagner le mouvement. Voilà ce que je voudrais dire et terminer en mentionnant les aspects que Madame la directrice exécutive du Centre du commerce international a soulignés par rapport à ce qui doit être fait par rapport aux micro, petites et moyennes entreprises, par rapport à l'instrument du commerce électronique, pour lever les contraintes que nous avons et obtenir les résultats attendus pour connecter nos marchés au monde. Parce qu'il y a encore des gaps, des écarts importants à combler. Je vous remercie pour l'occasion que vous nous offrez ce matin de remettre au goût du jour le programme du cadre intégré renforcé.
Okay, we have one more final question from Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in my humble perspective and from the Gambian perspective and also from the panelists, what we want to emphasize is the need for inclusive trade to look at the context, because looking at the context of different countries, every country is unique. We have different contexts, and how, in order to add value to the context, you need to leverage the local content, which is the developing the capacities and initiatives of the local communities, particularly women and youths, and leveraging them through a process. The inclusive trade is a process, and in order to move strategically, we need to harmonize the context, we need to develop the capacities to understand and to appreciate that there is need for South-South cooperation first, through integration and reintegration, because that will be an instrument that will definitely be a tool to leverage the different contexts, to harmonize, and at the same time to prepare them to enter the global markets. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have a large number of topic areas raised here, which I'm going to ask the panelists to react to. Just to read out two additional issues which have come to us from the social media operation of the organizers here. So one is about how can you compete in the global market while ensuring people and environment are protected. And the other one is how can we break down silos in government in order to work together well. So just summarizing a couple of the points, but not doing it justice. Obviously services, access to financial capital, local context, environment, silos. I'm going to ask everybody if they'd like to respond to anything there that they feel they can add to, and also make that a little bit of your concluding remarks. Maybe I can go to Professor Pauwelyn first, if you'd like to react to that.
Thank you. Well, just on my little perspective on partnerships, or on how to bring in the local context, how to leverage young people, small businesses. So as an academic and a practicing lawyer, what I have experienced is that we train lots of young people to become specialists in trade law and investment law. But then they have a hard time finding jobs to actually use their knowledge. Or they end up working with big law firms where they only help big multinationals, or the US or the EU. So how to bridge that gap between lots of people who are keen to share their knowledge, and the reality that many companies or countries still don't know how to operate, how to benefit from this regime. So what we have done is we have now 15 universities, part of that Trade Lab network, and we put them together. Young people in Africa, we put them together with students at Georgetown and Washington, and working on a concrete project together, like we helped South Sudan implement their accession to the East African community, makes them learn, makes them realize how to do this. And we put with those students, academics, experts, and all of this is done pro bono, but it's a way of helping beneficiaries, and at the same time creating awareness, expertise with young people all over the world. And I think that has been incredibly useful, and it doesn't cost anything. So as I said, it's not a question of money often, it's a question of putting people together and sharing what we already have.
Thank you. Dr. TEKRETH?
Thank you. I think, like I mentioned, that for LDC, there are many challenges. But if we work together, I think at least we can help to reduce these challenges because of themselves and because of the support from other country, other international organizations. The main challenge can be the competitiveness of the country and also the human capital, like I mentioned. And we have to help the young people to equip with that skill to have more productive work, to help in terms of agriculture, in terms of industry, so that we can compete with in this world market. And when we work together, we also need a rule. Like I said, that WTO rule-based system, one of the most effective so far that can help and support LDC. I think there may be not other rule that can protect the LDC, can bring the LDC to have a level playing field in trade or in other issues that arise in their in the way for the economic development of the country. And for us, we prepare to go for graduation, but we know that a lot of things that need to be done. We cannot do alone, so we need to support each other so that we can achieve and we can bring more prosperity to every nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Arancha?
I want to give a shout out to Joost and the Trade Lab. On the 25th of June, there will be a seminar in the WTO about women and public procurement and the document. So how to connect more women to markets using public procurement, which is a huge market in any of your countries. And the documentation, the background for this event has been prepared by Trade Lab. So thank you for that. Two small comments on my side. One, this idea that services are only for the big guys and for the rich guys, or that services are some sort of a standalone sector. Services are basic ingredients to improve the competitiveness of agriculture and manufacturing. Services is what will allow us to move from subsistence agriculture into agro-processing. It's all about services in agriculture. It's about finance, it's about distribution and logistics and payments and obviously digital. So this is, I want to support very much the agenda on services, which is key ingredient for the competitiveness of MSMEs. Et puis, je voudrais encourager vraiment, suivant le message de Éloi Laourou, je voudrais encourager les PME à être plus actifs sur les négociations à l'OMC. N'attendez pas que les autres poussent pour vous. Poussez. Vous avez votre liste des sujets. Vous avez la liste des sujets que vous avez sur laquelle vous avez travaillé depuis 25 ans, mais vous avez aussi votre propre liste de nouveaux sujets. Soyez plus actifs dans la négociation parce qu'aujourd'hui, cette maison a besoin des PME qui soient plus engagés pour pousser pour la puissance de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce. N'attendez pas aux autres. Faites votre travail, poussez vos sujets.
Thank you. Can I say straight away that I think I've just found a new partner because the Trade Lab sounds perfect. And I'm outing myself because, if those of you who don't know, I'm a lawyer. So that's why. There's some really important things that have come out, and I do want to agree with Arancha. We here in Geneva have created a Commonwealth Small States Office. That has enabled a number of our small states to participate in the negotiation processes and to have their voices heard. It is absolutely critically important that that happens, and we are very grateful to the funders who've enabled us to support our member states here in Geneva to make that contribution. We're also working on the hubs and spokes for trade, because that outreach and that practical implementation is what is critically important, and we too would emphasize the need for digitalization, the need for services, and that this is absolutely critical if we're going to get real growth and if we're going to engage women and young people. And we really do need to emphasize the work we're doing on micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. Because if you think of the top 10 global businesses today, they all actually have something in common that most people don't notice. And that is every single one of them started small. We're talking about Alibaba, Google, all of them started as a small and medium-sized enterprise and grew hugely. So it's critically important that we nurture the SMEs, and many of you will know that we've created a small and medium-sized enterprise network, launched firstly in India, but we have launched after the Commonwealth Games a network for the Pacific. We're launching in Kenya a network for Africa in November, and we are going to launch one for the Caribbean and one for Europe. So these networks are going to be critically important. But I want to come to deal with the issue about the fact that so few of our countries have graduated since 1971. Since 1971, we've only had 5 countries graduate. And I think we have to understand and work even harder to create a smoother pathway for those who are graduating, because there are some of our countries who are very timorous about graduating because they are climate vulnerable. For 31 of our small member countries, they face the existential threat from climate change. So when you look at countries like Tuvalu and Kiribati, I know they have resisted graduation because of their extra vulnerability. So we're going to have to look at whether we can create, as I know it's being talked about, a new category of highly vulnerable to climate change. So all the work that we are all doing on the green economy, on the blue economy, on our oceans, on our governance and peace and youth, I think what we've seen today is all of that is integrated. We can't look at it as hermetically sealed issues. We need to look at all of it together. And I'm hoping that through the integrated program that we have now been able to agree with 53 leaders in the CHOGM of 2018, that may be a platform for global agreement. And the reason I say that is this. In 2013, the Commonwealth signed the Commonwealth Charter. 16 clauses of that charter in the preamble was partnership. In September 2017, the UN signed the SDGs, which are the same 16 elements, and SDG 17 is partnership, which is in the preamble. In Malta, in November 2015, the Commonwealth agreed on enforceability, 2 degrees, and a 1.5 degree for our climate resilience. What happened in Paris? An agreement for 2 degrees, enforceability, and a 1.5 aspirational target. So I think we can use the Commonwealth and the 53 Commonwealth countries as our petri dish to try and work out what may work. And I'm thanking absolutely everyone for everything you've said today, because we are sucking it in and trying to turn it into an implementation strategy. And I know that the partnership that we will sign with the EIF after this afternoon will just be another brick in the wall to shore up the bridge that we need to get from where we are to where we want to be. So I want to just thank everyone who's helped us to do that.
Thank you. And Minister, final word.
We've talked about trade being very important, yes. But more often than not, we don't walk the talk. The budgeting, the resources accorded to either the departments of commerce or ministries are very limited. And it is through actually the Ministry of Commerce or Trade making people aware of trade as being one of the most important aspects of actually propelling our countries, our economies. We don't give enough resources, and this is the appeal. We should, I'm glad Her Excellency is here on behalf of the governments from Africa. I think we need really to fund adequately most of the departments that deal with trade or commerce. And it is actually through such funding that you can then be able to even train women, youth through SMEs in order to appreciate the importance of trade so that they can then be able to participate. That is the inclusion we are talking about, to participate in international, locally available opportunities even within the countries or within the regions. So this is very critical We often talk about, or we give credits to flagship projects. Yes, these are very important, but to me, if you are going to look at youths, women, and other, of course, physically challenged groups, who are the majority anyway in our LDCs, and if they are going to participate in trade internationally or regionally or nationally, I think we need to put the resources where they deserve to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's time to conclude this panel. I think we all know that one of the key requirements for development is avoiding major disruption. And so I think in this time of uncertainty, one of the tests for the trade system will be whether it can mitigate risks and vulnerabilities for LDCs. It's clear, I think, to get these inclusive results that we need to have benefit from dispassionate analysis, such as we've seen, but also inclusive inputs from all of you, because we do really need LDCs engaged in the trade system. So let me thank very much the speakers and the organizers, and hand back to our MC.
Thank you, and thank you all for a fascinating discussion. It's been so interesting. And I think there's just one point that I would draw out. The Sustainable Development Goal agenda is not 17 siloed goals. It's linked. And at the heart of it are people. And if we don't invest in the people of each of our countries, in their education, in their health, ensuring they have clean water and sanitation available, then how can we hope that they will learn the skills that will enable them to support and benefit from trade globally? So I hope that we'll all think about that SDG agenda very much as an inclusive agenda, people at the centre. So that concludes the end of our morning. It's been a fascinating opening to this forum. It's been really exciting to hear so many different views. I'd like to invite you all to join us in the atrium now for the signing of the partnership agreement between EIF Secretariat and the Commonwealth Secretariat, and we'll be joined by the Deputy Executive Director of the WTO. During lunch, please come and visit the Knowledge Exchange Pavilion, which is also in the atrium. There's lots of exciting different expositions there. And then we'll reconvene here at 2:15 this afternoon. There'll be a session here on the trade facilitation agreement and what that means for LDCs. And there'll also be another parallel session taking place over in the W room, which is over there somewhere, which is on agriculture and trade. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all later.